life, and now the likes of Google and YouTube and Microsoft and Facebook and AOL, they want to get into the hunt, and why not? You know, there's $20 billion at stake, something to go for. You know, sure, you can buy media all year round. I mean, you know, these guys will sell you media all year round. Google and AOL will sell you media all year round. But there's something about the upfront that, you know, where this massive money, in theory, kind of sits, and we all want a piece of it. And I guess the question is, I mean, for one part anyway, is this a threat to existing networks, or does it embolden these guys, you know, that the business is still a good one? So, you know, overall, the upfront keeps changing. You know, a lot of people have predicted its just demise years ago, but it's still around. It's here, you know. So we want to explore that and the other, as Joe was saying, the other extensions and valuable additions that TV has to offer. And we have a great panel here. Okay, so let's start. Let's start with the usual this time. Usually I go this at the end, and I'll ask Joe this question. You know, let's start with the bigger traditional picture. You know, where, here we are in April, early April, do you think the market is these days? The scatter market, and maybe where the upfront market's going to be? You know, some people have projected that, you know, volume growth could be, you know, 1% for the broadcast networks, 3% for cable, other people saying 3 to 4%. What do you think?
I would say that just the existing market's been pretty good. The first quarter of the broadcast season last year, the fourth quarter, started out great, and it kind of fizzled the last couple of weeks of December. First quarter's been really, really steady, and prices pretty high. Second quarter, we're about almost done in the second quarter, and the numbers look pretty good. That all leads to what happens next year. It should tend to be a fairly strong market just based on scatter being up front. And I look at everybody's quarterlies, and they look pretty good. They look pretty good. MTV had a tough time in the fourth quarter, but I think they've come back in first quarter. So it should be pretty good.
Chris, from a marketer's media perspective there, where are things? I think you're on there.
Is it, I think we're, I mean, I wouldn't call it pretty good. I think last year was pretty good. Last year was a pretty healthy upfront market. I think in hindsight it might have been a little bit overpriced, but that happens once in a while. At the time, I think we were looking at, I think we expected the television market to be a little more healthy in the full year than it's actually turned out this year. If I think back to our projections at the time, we were thinking total TV spend for the year would be about 6 or 7% up by the end of the full broadcast year. And now our guys are projecting it to be about half that, more like 3 or 4%. So, and I'm sorry, 3 or 4% for this coming year. So we're basically looking at a TV market where we're expecting growth to be about half of what it was last year. And you know, I don't feel that the scatter marketplace has been that robust. I mean, every time I've surveyed my buying teams, you know, the responses I've been getting back have been all, you know, relatively moderate, you know, flat to low single digits above upfront pricing in most places, which is a scatter market that I don't think has backed up those higher upfront prices. So when you think about that and you think about the supply situation in network primetime, you know, really not down very much this year, I think we're looking at a much more moderate upfront.
Donna, go ahead, go right ahead. You were on the one side, now on the other, so you can give us your exact perspective.
Hello, is it on? Yeah. The marketplace isn't any different than that we've actually expected. Upfront was strong, and the scatter market is exactly what we thought it was going to be. The reason that upfront was strong is because there was a lot more scatter money that went into the upfront, so we knew that scatter was going to be moderate. It's not extremely high, but it's not low. And the good news is that the pricing is above upfront, which is where it should be. So it's exactly where the marketplace is landing. Options in first and in second quarter are minimal. So if the marketplace was out of whack, Chris, there would have been much more options taken to be put into the market. So we are in a really, really good place, and I think it's going to be strong moving forward.
Mike, is the marketplace out of whack or in whack? Where's the whack?
I used to know this woman. I don't even, you look the same. Something has changed. Boy, so quickly.
7 weeks, baby.
Oh, my goodness.
Is that exactly where you thought it would be 6 months ago?
I should be like Jon Stewart and play the videotape of Donna from no. You know what? And I'm not just saying. I'll say the same things I've said to the clients who always will now ask us, and that's another way of second guessing us on why did we pay this much last year. And to Chris's point, I think that as you look back with the benefit of hindsight, we paid a little bit too much, a couple of points too much last year. The scatter marketplace should be, and even coming from a buyer, should be 10, 15% above the upfront. That gives the advantage to upfront advertisers. Your best customers should have a clear pricing advantage over scatter advertisers. When, as much as a buyer, we might say, hey, great to go through the year and not have to pay scatter premiums, that's not good for us. We would prefer it to be a 10 to 15% increase. When you don't get that, then it's suspect that last year's upfront was a little high. So that's the way we would look at it.
So,
Mel.
So I think that we've all been doing this long enough to know that in general, the market never quite finds the perfect equilibrium point. And in general, it always overcorrects. So I think if the last upfront perhaps was a little more heated in terms of volume and pricing, the normal tendency we would see after that is for the market to pull back a bit. Unfortunately, I think what will happen this year is that all of the economic signs look a heck of a lot better. So I think if you pull back this year, you're going to be facing a scatter market where the auto industry is recovering, where a lot of the basic categories that drive our business are really looking at a much better year economically. Corporate profits have certainly been great. So I think that when you look at this year's upfront, I wouldn't really expect it to be so weak as some people are forecasting that it will be.
Last year, at the time of the upfront, the GDP expectations were twice what they are for this year.
And where's GDP now?
They're expecting it to be about 2% growth this year, which is relatively slow growth.
From my perspective, which is a little bit different now that don't have my nose pressed up against the mirror every day. You know, what Mel just hit on, that Magel, in his own way, tried to refute. This is, what you're looking at now is the new normal in the supply and demand metrics. So the new normal on the demand side is that marketers have sort of equalized or you know, gone through all the pain of cutting back, and now they're into building share. You're talking about, you know, the automotive industry, which is a panel that'll come up later, but coming out with so many new models, and all those categories, retail, electronics, credit cards, fast food, they're all spending. So their new normal level of spending is kind of what you saw last up front. And the reality is that there's a lot of differences network by network, as I observed firsthand. You know, you have the haves and the have-nots. There are people who have great ratings and great brand propositions and great content that are in high, high demand. Those are the ones that are going to be able to get the price. It's the have-nots that are going to have some problems this year. So, you know, what's going on with measurement and what's going on with viewing is really an important factor, because on the supply side, there's a lot of rating points that are being either unmonetized or undermonetized, be it VOD or people watching on tablets and stuff like that. So you've just seen, you know, a lot of analysts have downgraded a couple of media companies, and the primary reason that they cited was ratings. Now, the reason the ratings are an issue at some places are because of different habits of consumption and the fact that they can't be measured. And if they can't be measured, they can't be monetized. So I think that's going to affect scarcity in this upfront. And in the new normal, you're looking at probably $10 billion in cable. Right, David? Whatever you say. Okay, so Levy agrees with me. Let the record show. $10 billion in the cable upfront, and a very healthy broadcast upfront.
Chris, what are clients asking of you these days? What are they anticipating? Are they worried that the market's going to be nearly as strong as a year ago?
I don't think worried is the right word. I mean, I think a healthy television market is a good indicator of the economy overall. But I don't see future expectations to be quite as bright to your point about the GDP, as they might have been last year. And that's why we saw that influx of dollars into the upfront marketplace kind of all at once, all sort of late in the game, and knowing that, you know, at least in the back end of the year, there would be ways to get out of those dollars if things didn't work out. Now, the good news is, to Donna's point, we saw very little of that. So there is stability out there, I believe, in the economy. And most of our clients, at least, are, you know, looking at things as if they will improve, but not dramatically, and not in a way that will cause them to spend an awful lot of more money on media than they did last year. So.
And I think the dynamics have changed in scatter, and I think that's why it's a little bit different. You know, there's not this surge of this big scatter marketplace that usually happens quarter by quarter. Mm-hmm. So, you know, from a psychological standpoint, everybody sees this surge of money that comes in the beginning of the quarter, usually. What's happening now is we know that marketers want to keep their dollars closer to the vest so they have more flexibility. So scatter is happening, it's just happening on a more of a week-to-week basis, which is just making the dynamics of the marketplace a little different. It's not that it's not there, it's just different versus how it has been in the past. And that's one of the things that's changed.
Yeah, it just in total isn't coming out to be what everybody expected a year ago. I mean, last year was a year of pretty significant growth. It was coming right out of a recessionary period, and that growth has slowed quarter to quarter over time with revenue reporting, et cetera. And we're in the midst of what we would call a small deceleration. There's still acceleration, but it's slower acceleration. And I think all we're trying to say is this scatter marketplace has been okay. It hasn't backed up the upfront numbers from last year. The economic situation is more moderate than it was expected to be a year ago. Hence, the ad spend expectations are more moderate. And as much as everybody would like to believe the upfront is all about the now and what's happening in the market now, it actually is very much about what we believe the end game is going to be. I mean, we're not paying prices based on what happened in the current quarter scatter marketplace. We're paying prices based on what we believe to be the full year television spend. And that's generally what makes a buyer comfortable with the price that they pay in the upfront. Okay, if it's going to be, if the upfront may be up 10%.
Sure.
If we only believe that the total spend is going to be up 3% by the end of the year, we're not going to pay a price that's reflective of a 10% increase in spend.
Right.
You should really factor in. You have to factor in the Olympics, which is $1 billion in the third quarter. That hasn't slowed down this year's broadcast season. That's not going to be there next year. What happens to that money, or half of it? That goes back into the upfront marketplace. So that's
not all of it.
There's a factor there.
Not all of it.
Some of it.
I said half of it.
You said half.
I said 500.
Okay.
And
Half of it gets placed beforehand.
You know, I think
wish it did.
what is a little bit unfortunate and misleading about the way we judge success in this business is it all gets tied to the inflation rate. And I don't know of any company, any client of ours, first of all, that believes that their success or failure necessarily is tied to how much they can raise their prices. Look at revenue growth, and revenue growth comes from a lot of different places. It is, you know, to Dave's point, it is about ratings growth, so you're performing better, just as if some of our clients, if you're, you know, Kellogg in the cereal business, it's a share battle. It's a battle to get more volume. It's not all about a Kellogg, or any of our clients can't necessarily assume that inflation is going to be the key to success. Yet in our business, everyone, all they talk about is as if inflation is the measure of success, when for all companies like yours, the media companies, ultimately it's about revenue and revenue growth. And I think we get caught up too much in how do you define success. Some of these companies, with the success of Discovery Communications and A&E Networks and the Turner Networks, their success is a function of a lot of factors, price being just one of them. And I think Upfront just focuses on this one dynamic, and then everybody obsesses about the fact that, well, are these businesses going to be successful or not based on whether they get a +5 or a +10 in the marketplace. That is only really a part of the story, and I think we sometimes lose sight about what it is that really drives these businesses.
I think just to second something Mike said, I think another factor in the upfront process, and another reason the upfront has lived and endured well beyond the time that it was declared dead, is that it basically satisfies a marketplace need for big marketers and your guys' clients to lay in the inventory you want and to get first shot at that inventory and to lay it in at a protected rate with a guarantee. And I think in that respect, the upfront has worked extremely well. Probably 14 out of 15 years, scatter rates are above upfront. We're not arguing today about whether scatter rates are above upfront. So it's a successful mechanism, and it works well for marketers, and I think that's the reason it's endured, and that's the reason we'll probably be talking about the upfront in another 10 years.
Dave, you mentioned autos being a relatively good category, you know, now as a sort of outsider in between things. Where else do you see, you know, sort of some of the category growth maybe this year?
Well, last year retail was an amazing story in the fourth quarter. There were people, sort of to Mel's point, who couldn't get their money down in the upfront in retail. And I think that that will continue to be a very hot category. The movies look to be very good this year. Fast food, you know, Burger King is not going to stand still in the position that they're in the marketplace, ceding second place to Wendy's. And, you know, you just continue, you know, in the financial category, the credit cards, insurance, you know, soft drinks. There's not a category that you look at it and say, you know, that one's not so good. And to tell you the truth, I'm trying to read the tea leaves, what's going on in packaged goods. I don't know that I really understand that. You know, Procter had made some noise about cutting back their television spending and stuff. You know, it's like, you know, turning an oil tanker a quarter of a degree and everybody gets all upset. But, you know, like I said, in an economy that is sort of this new normal, people are looking to either regain, maintain, or grow share, and that means you're going to spend more money in television, I think. I also heard a statistic where something to the effect that newspaper advertising was down in the past 5 years, something like 50%. That's a huge number. Well, that money is not going to television, obviously. It's going to the internet and search, but, you know, things change. But I don't see an area that I would point to and say, that's one that I'm concerned is not going to be spending this up front.
What do you make of, you know, the digital upfront guys who now want to get into this game? You know, for years they've always thought that they were sort of a, you know, different animal that didn't need the upfront. Now they kind of want a presence. You know, any of you guys have a point of view about?
From my perspective, what's happening, I have had more clients or prospective clients in the digital space come to me and say, you know, we really want to get involved in the upfront. And I'm saying, of course you do. I mean, they're spending billions and billions of dollars. But it has, the upfront in television, again, to Mel's point, has to do with scarcity. And if you, whatever the statistic is, we use every year 12 out of the past 13 years or 14 out of the past 15 years. If you bought in the upfront, you did better than buying in scatter. That always isn't the case in digital. Now, there are pockets of inventory, high quality inventory, and content propositions in digital that I think are scarce, and they will enjoy, you know, good pricing, but the buying cycles don't exactly line up the same way. So, you know, I think that's it's always a good idea to get a bunch of people sitting in a room talking about digital and the new fronts or whatever they're calling it. It's a good idea. Is it going to result in a big upfront sales bazaar? I don't think so.
Is it kind of like the way cable was years ago? I mean, you know, people said the same thing about cable, like, oh, there's a lot of inventory that we can buy at any time. Now, all of a sudden, you know, with cable, you know, with Monday Night Football or original dramas and stuff, you have to buy, you know, you got to get there.
Yeah, I think it evolves. You're right. With cable 8 years ago, 9 years ago, right, every deal was a good deal because we weren't sold out. It's getting very sold out now, but that can be a bigger factor, but it may take a couple of years. I don't see it a factor this year, and maybe not next year. But you walk in one day and there's $200 million off the table, that's going to be a factor in the upfront. It's going to be a factor.
Mel,
one thing I want to clarify, and that is, there's not one upfront. I mean, everybody's got their own jobs to do, and everybody's got their own issues. And broadcast and cable, they look like they're the same upfront, and there's one number, but they're really not. They're really not. I mean, we may sell 50% of our inventory. Broadcast sells 85. Going in, they really are 105% sold out. So it's different dynamics. Then when you get to scatter, there's a lot of advertisers that cable rights in scatter. that broadcasters don't even participate in. And we do a great job managing DR. So the dynamics are very different, yet we call it one upfront, one band of money, and one number. And it really isn't. It's splintered out to a lot of different issues. Digital may be one of them.
Chris.
Yeah. Well, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say
Go ahead.
that, just to go back to the digital thing, to compare it to cable or the early days of cable, I think we're missing something, and that is that you had content either being developed at some cable networks. I mean, Discovery's a great example of that, where you had quality television coming online that people wanted to be part of, or you had acquisitions being made so that cable networks were growing up either with sports rights or with content that had been successful on the broadcast networks. We're not seeing that yet coming from digital-based media owners, if you will. I mean, for the most part, what we're seeing are these opportunities to buy programming we're already getting in traditional television on a new platform, or we're seeing stuff that I don't know if you've sat through the Google, the YouTube thing. I think it's going to take a while for there to be the sort of dynamic there that agencies and advertisers look at it and say, gee, I want to make a long-term commitment to an 8-minute program that's going to run maybe over the course of a month or so. The whole upfront proposition doesn't really make too much sense in that world yet.
Or buying the Yahoo homepage. I mean, that's not,
Well,
for some it might be good. Chris, you were saying?
I don't think these guys are. I think there's always the hope that that some money's going to move to these players in the upfront because they have these presentations leading into the upfront marketplace. This, in my opinion, this is, and I think a good way of creating visibility for the fact that they are all investing significantly in original content. This is a great way for them to get on a stage and, as Dave said, get a lot of people in the room to think about digital. What I think they're trying to get people to think about is content. They're trying to say that if you're buying all this video content on television, just realize that we all have a lot of money, we're going to spend a lot of money, and we're going to try to build an audience, and we'd like you guys to see what we have. And I think that it's going to be a good learning opportunity for a lot of people. I'm always in support of any way that the video marketplace can be expanded with top quality original content, and I think any advertiser would say the same, wherever it's distributed. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get a $500 million shift into that medium in 1 year. However, if the awareness is building and the support begins to build, it makes it that much easier to make the right strategic moves and to sell through the right strategic moves to clients over the next couple of years.
I think, but Chris Tracy made an interesting point that the video that people are streaming is TV content. And that is the big difference. So Google and YouTube, are definitely coming out with their 100 channels. And yes, it could be original programming, but it's not television content. And right now, the behavior of the consumer is still focusing on that type of programming where they want to get it on any screen, whether it's mobile, what went on with the streaming with March Madness, it was out of control. ESPN, all the news areas. So that is now what's going on with the behavior of the consumer. So I think YouTube and Google definitely are investing, and I think they're trying to go out there, but I'm not sure if the behavior of who we're trying to reach is gonna be there. I think it's still gonna be very, very small audiences that flock to that type of audience. I mean, they're looking for health, they're looking for music, which again are all really good avenues that marketers are definitely potentially looking at, but it still may be in a very small increment that still may not be worth it. So there's years and years of growth that have to happen in those areas, but the TV content seems to be the area that 18-year-olds, 24-year-olds, and as they're growing and maturing, they're going to start behaving differently, whether it's on a smartphone, their iPad, wherever it is, and that's what's going to take, and that's what's going to expand the video landscape for all of us, is all the multi-screens.
So I don't disagree with that, because I do believe that as this online video marketplace expands, with the television community is going to be a very big part of the money that's spent in that area and of the audience. And maybe also the print community, publishers in general, right,
Agreed.
of content.
Agreed.
However, I do think that we all have to recognize that that youth does spend a lot of time watching video that's not television networks. we're working with this this small student group with the AARF, and we have them working on this this study of video habits and video behavior. And just last Friday, I was they were presenting their findings to us about what their diaries were. And they all were talking about their favorite video sites and why they like those video sites and what content they're watching and where they watch it. And at the end of it, I asked them all, I said, when we asked you to do this video project, did we fail to mention that TV was also video? Because not one of them mentioned MTV or any other television network in any of their presentations. They were YouTube, they were Vimeo, there were tons of players, and there were players I had not even heard of. I was actually shocked. And it was a little bit of a wake-up call for me just to realize that, you know, we all know that youth have, and especially millennials, kids in college, they have different viewing habits, and when they get out of college, they start to fall into different habits, and that's why TV will always be a big part of what we do. But if you look at the viewership online right now of online video, YouTube is way more than 50% of the viewing online. It just isn't where all the money's getting spent right now.
But
the money's getting spent on the TV stuff.
But if you also look at the numbers, TV viewing last year reached an all-time high.
Yeah.
So I think you have to look at a lot of the content, and a lot of the content that we're talking about online actually is our own content. It's content like the NCAA, or Joe has very powerful online components, as do we. A lot of the content that generates a significant amount of the viewership online is content that's consistent with what we have on air, and that money and those impressions really they aggregate back. So in many ways, you're not seeing the same kind of dynamic that you may have seen when broadcast was facing pure erosion. This pie's getting bigger. Viewership's getting bigger. It's the ability to watch, the time shift and place shift is actually making it a lot easier for people to find their favorite content on any platform in any place, which is a terrific thing for all of us.
I think the challenge today is, you know, a combination of what both Mel and Chris were saying is how do you integrate the new into the existing? And that's a huge challenge, and it's primarily a measurement challenge, and how do you, move ads around into all these different platforms? There are companies out there like Freewheel who are doing stuff that's really, really cool where they can, insert ads, wherever the video travels and count it up and hopefully then get it into a position where it's monetizable. But it's that integration that's going to be really, really difficult and especially important, as Chris mentions, with that younger demographic.
I want to ask everyone to think about some questions, because we'll open it up to the audience for questions at the end. That brings us obviously to the other point, was right now, where do things stand, come to the sellers, when it comes to amassing your traditional TV content and your digital? How much, to Mel and Joe and Donna, are you selling, combined sales, to people who want, digital and, traditional TV exposure?
I'll tell you, Wendy, it's smaller than you think, unfortunately. I mean, it's probably a couple % of our business.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I would have thought 4 years ago, 3 years ago, that when you buy Deadliest Catch, you're going to buy every platform Deadliest Catch appears on, mobile and so forth. Honestly, the advertisers haven't followed it. A few have, but not advertisers have followed it. And I'll bet it's not 25% of our business digitally. They seem to run in different courses, whether it's demographics, but not tied into the shows. Now, maybe that's habit of viewers, that our digital players are not our TV watchers. You'd think logically they would be, but they may not be. I'm still waiting for it to converge, and it really hasn't converged.
I agree with Joe. Right now, it's a very small percentage, but I think it's going to change. I think we're at a very, very pivotal point where now marketers are looking to create more experiences with their content and create it across all the platforms. So, and one of the issues on their side, was my side, was...
You got to pick a side.
Well, Rodham tells me I'm a double agent, so... The dollars for this space have been very... they've been in different buckets. So there's been challenges on where the dollars come from. So in the midst of an upfront, where the television networks have come to them with the dollars. The decisions couldn't be made that readily because they didn't have access to those digital budgets. Now it is changing, and Mike and Chris now have more access to those budgets while they're going into markets. So now there's a much bigger marketing and experience thought process moving forward that I think we will slowly now see more coming to market. And again, it all has to make sense. It's not money that's going to come in just for the sake of coming in, and I know that. But I think we're at this pivotal point where the dollars now are in a place that, if it makes sense, there's an appetite and an opportunity to happen.
When you think about the digital assets that television networks have to work with, what you can do with those digital assets, they fall into sort of three buckets, right? You got sort of sponsorship-driven, customized experience, extension-type opportunities. Right. You got your digital pure play where you're selling directly to the digital agencies and the digital groups with probably a different set of KPIs right now. And then you have the video, right? And the video is what I think some of you guys are talking about, and the money has not moved to video as quickly as I think anybody would have liked. Also, I think the size of the audience on the cable side is challenged because of authentication. We got to get over the authentication. But from a spend standpoint, this is another sort of aha moment for me in the last couple of years. I've expounded upon the benefits of online video to clients for many, many years. I mean, it's been around for a long time. It is a highly interactive, lean-forward experience. The ad effectiveness has always been stronger than on live TV. It's a less passive and more active experience. However, no matter how much we've been able to explain that and demonstrate that to clients, we do a video upfront, as part of the upfront, and we get out of 25 active clients, we get about 3 clients to participate. And sometimes it's not even the same 3 clients. And there's a lot of pushback. And there's a lot of justification. And what's with the measurement? How are we going to do this? And the minute that CW came to us and said that they wanted to sell online video, they were going to up the commercial load, but they were going to sell it at television prices. And then Fox did the same thing. 95% participation, no more questions, no more justification, no more problems. In fact, everybody said, how do we get more of this? So in my mind, a huge block to why this money hasn't moved is price. And there's a lot of other reasons, and there certainly are access to the budget's reasons as well. But when you get, TV everywhere is a very hot topic for all of us right now, and I think that in order to get universal participation and for you guys to be able to monetize all of those VOD and online and mobile impressions, you're going to have to start thinking about that price, because you're going to get that near universal participation as soon as you get over the hump.
Mel, then Chris.
I think Chris is on an important point, because I think, first of all, we're all in a scale business. And we haven't synced this up. We haven't made online video a scale business at this point. And I think as far as the measurement issues, we're talking a little bit about apples and oranges. If we can figure out a way, and I think Rob Tuck has done a very good job at the CW, of creating an easy process for buyers to put money into. So I think that when we figure out this measurement issue of equating an online and a linear impression, or at least giving them a relatability that allows people to spend money and understand how those two pieces work together instead of in parallel universes, then I think we're going to get somewhere a lot more quickly than we have. And I think we're having a lot more of those conversations right now. Certainly I've been having more with these guys than I've ever had in the past, and I think we're making headway.
Well, we spoke about it yesterday. I mean, I think it comes down to, in some ways, just a decision that the media owners need to make, and that is, are you going to monetize the content online basically in the same fashion that you're doing it in linear television? Are you going to commercialize it more, take a lower price point on a cost per thousand or cost per point, if you can get that far in terms of the measurement, and most everybody can now, but you're willing to build your business by just commercializing the content to the same degree that it is on linear television. And I can't make that decision for them, but to Chris's point about the CW, that was very easy for our clients to understand and comprehend. Yeah, it's going to be commercialized more, but yeah, I'm going to pay the same price that I am And there's an audience, at least with that network in particular, where it's logical to assume that a lot of those folks would just as easily watch that television show on their computer as they would.
But
on a regular
I think
television set,
if all the online video marketplace becomes is full episode players, that's nothing to what its potential is. So I think that what CW did, what Fox did, makes all the sense in the world, but that's a baby step. That's not the potential, because the number one, the content, the forms of content online are naturally going to be different. You know, it's going to be a mobile device, whether it's a tablet or a smartphone. You're not watching necessarily full episodes. That's not where the growth is. So the choice has to be, are you creating content specifically for the devices that people are going to want to consume it on? And if we think that just is a matter of taking half-hour and hour-long shows and monetizing that, that's not where it's going. That's not what YouTube's about. YouTube is about creating content for the way people consume video on different devices. And I think we don't want to get caught in that trap of taking the TV model and force-fitting it onto other devices.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that people want that television content, that long-form content, on other platforms. Sure. We should be able to support it if we want.
Absolutely.
Just like in television,
Right.
there are many tools to accomplish what you need to accomplish, right? And the video marketplace has lots of different kinds of video, lots of different kinds of ad formats, and lots of different kinds of targeting capabilities, right? And you know, I think television advertisers have actually gotten really good at considering alternatives to either be more efficient or to deliver objectives with a good mix of premium and an efficiency-driven product, and even in some cases higher, better targeted product. And I think we can do the same thing with the online video marketplace, although the online video marketplace offers a wealth of targeting opportunities and business ROI driving opportunities that none of the mass media are going to offer us, and I think we have to find a way to mix them both.
Joe, isn't there an issue with that you have different pricing? I mean, obviously, the CPMs on video in digital are like 3-4 times. So
the pricing's different. You're right, but I look at CW. I'm not so sure that's a great model. I mean, their ratings are way down, and I don't know whether the digital space helped them or hurt them. We looked at some of the ratings on MTV, on the kids networks have gone way down. And one of the theories is it went on Netflix. The kids are watching it on Netflix. They're not watching it on their linear TVs. So their business model starts to break. I mean, we do this. We made a deal with Amazon, and we made a deal with Netflix. And I tell you, the company was divided whether we should do this or not. Is it going to hurt your business model? Okay. As we start distributing our content digitally, we really have to give this a real hard look. Some of it has to be with, I mean, Chris says, is it 2 commercials or 3 commercials? Is it worth more if it's less intrusive as far as a viewer? These are the issues that we have to deal with. I don't know whether that's a model that the overall model works. It may work, looks like it works in the digital space. I don't think it's worked for CW.
And Chris, to your point, I mean, the clients do worry about it being too commercialized. I mean, that perhaps their ads are running, maybe not everyone wants their ads to run digital.
Well, I think that you could have looked at it in its original form and, you know, see perhaps one advertiser associated with an hour-long show, and maybe there was only 2 of the 5 commercial pods were even being utilized, and say that's worth the premium, absolutely. But I just think that we were talking about when are the dollars going to flow, and the dollars flowed very easily when the CW said it's the same price point. I'm not trying to say it was good for their business or bad for their business. That was a decision that they had to make. When Rob explained it to me, I said, you're probably going to have a few takers. I was honestly surprised by the participation we had, because it was the programming that we were buying anyway. So
I just don't know if TV companies you have a choice, it's your business, but there are other players that are investing in the content right now, and their goal is to draw audience away from television networks, and they would love it if all of the TV networks decided not to put any content online. They would love that.
Because they have no other business, right?
No, understood.
You know, if you have 98% of revenue here and 2 here, are you going to risk this to try to improve the 2% to 3%? It doesn't work that way. Now,
that's what the music studios were saying 10 years ago.
But in a few years, it is going to change. I mean, we're lucky. We have 150,000 hours of our own product. We can distribute it all the time. So this is a big issue for our company. Yeah. And we have to figure this out. But I don't think we just jump into it and go, boy, did we make a mistake when it's too late.
From the audience, any questions out there? No? Mr. Taker?
Hey, Chris, and Mike. This is I'm Jason Brown from Gas Station TV. I have a question for you guys. It seems that, from a structural standpoint, you guys are set up to buy content that kind of follows multiple screen from content players like Discovery Networks. But how about the digital out-of-home players that have video moving to obviously content moving to platforms outside the home, or even YouTube or some of the other digital players that don't really own content. They're more distribution players. How are you set up to buy it? Is it your groups? Is it digital groups? And is there anything that you're planning to do in the future to converge your buying groups?
We have a really good out-of-home group that is probably more advanced in terms of technology than most would give them credit for. So whether it's video or static outdoor signage, whatever, I mean, it's pretty much within their realm to interact with it, to buy it. So.
Yeah, I like to believe that if we're doing the right thing for our clients, we're looking for ways to spread our video investment across different channels. So I am a definite proponent of a holistic video approach. When we go to see our clients, we talk about the fact that television, as well as it's worked for clients over the last many years, it does over-deliver heavy television viewers, people who have jobs, people who leave their home every day, actually are self-identifying as higher income, lighter TV viewers. The fact that a medium like digital out-of-home has come to bear in the last 5 years is a benefit. I think it's a huge opportunity for advertisers to supplement some of the light TV viewers they're not getting from television. Our group does have responsibility to be able to consider those networks as part of their mix. We partner up with our digital groups when we're talking about online video, so we work in tandem with them, and they manage the online video as part of an overall digital strategy. Whether that's going to change in the future, I think that really comes down to what agencies think is the right model. I do think that there's a benefit to integration. It's just a matter of whether it's integration, collaboration. One or the other is probably going to do the job as long as it's done right.
We created a hybrid team, actually, between the television group and the digital group just to look at online video. And those guys are still actually doing buys and sort of getting money from both sides at this point. So.
Yeah, but I think there's a tendency, because of that sort of gravitational pull of the TV budgets, because that is still where that largest source of revenue potential is for others like place-based video, and even this is where cinema got into the game, and others, as well as online video, to say, well, we're TV replacement, as if it's all kind of the same. And it's not the same, right. Which is good. Gas station TV, we buy gas station TV not because it's television, it's because it's something completely unique. There are things we can do to drive traffic into those gas station convenience stores, or we know that if our QSR is down the block, we can do things that we could never do on TV. So I think there's this tendency to say, okay, yeah, we have one set of buyers, it's all TV, because everyone wants to hear that because that's where all the money is. We don't look at it that way. I'm perfectly fine having it measured differently because they're different results. Why are you buying it? Why, to Joe's point earlier, the frustration about why isn't he selling Deadliest Catch online as successfully as TV? That's a great question, because then the question is, why are people buying it on TV? What's the purpose? What are they getting out of it? Is it just exposure? Because if it's just exposure, then they're not going to care so much about the online version of Deadliest Catch or the game or the whatever, the merchandise around it. On the other hand, if a brand wants a deeper experience with a brand, and Deadliest Catch is a brand, then we should be going deeper. We do it in sports all the time. Everyone gets it in sports. If you're in NFL, if you got the Shield, you do everything. You do fantasy, you do online, you do magazine, you do radio, you do television, of course. We tend to put it all together when we know we're aligning the brands. Other times we're just putting messages out there that live on their own. And sometimes gas station TV or any place-based video, whether it's in a health club, in a mall, is serving a specific purpose for whatever brands we're representing, and that's okay. And we don't have to call it TV, and I don't have to have a TV buyer buy it to know that we're looking at it the right way.
Oh, well, that was a good question, but I have kind of a related one, which is I was surprised to hear from Joe that only about 2 percentage points of your business is online video now. And, you know, it kind of makes sense if you think that only 2% of video consumption now is to a source other than linear TV, I guess. But I want to ask you, because when I think about where digital is now, I think it's, in a way, kind of like where early cable was, in some ways, in terms of consumer adoption, penetration, and industry acceptance. So back in those days, you guys all remember Ted Bates came up with the 5% solution. So I'd just like to ask the buyers, Chris, and Mike, to think for a minute and just suggest what now in 2012 is the right solution. Chris, you said you were pushing your clients to consider it more and more. There's not so much uptake, but maybe there needs to be a statement like there's a percentage just to get people to, you know, prime their pumps and think about it as part of a flow chart or a business plan or something.
The depth to which an advertiser can get involved in online video is, there's a lot of, like I said before, there's a lot of tools that you can use. And if you wanted to stick with just full episode players, you're probably not going to spend a whole lot in online video. They're not so huge that you could take a big chunk of your television budget and put it there. However, there is some scale to be had if you start to consider more genres, more ad opportunities. There is a ton of original content being produced and being invested in right now. There is, I think, this idea of curation of content, even if it's user-generated, and sort of putting like-minded content together for a like-minded audience and pulling it from all different parts of the web is a big opportunity. I do think that web-originated companies are going to add a lot of original content, although it's probably not all going to succeed in year one. I think all of these guys are going to get a little dose of what television networks go through every year with the success rate of programming, and they're going to have to deal with that. But and then you can go into when you start to look at ad networks. If they're more efficient, they're highly scalable, but they're not necessarily. You know, you have to think about the content there. So there are a lot of controls in place to try to manage content, but it's not perfect. So you have to feel comfortable going to those different levels. So depending on which of those areas you're playing in, that sort of changes the recommendation for how deep you might go in online video. It could be as little as 1%. It could maybe go up to 3 or 4%. But I don't think that there's a ton of rationale to go much deeper than that.
You know, obviously, when we talk about putting digital video together in buys with traditional TV, a lot of issues of measurement come up. But it sounds like, you know, from the buyers anyway, that the clients love it. You know, from the sellers, you know, they'll more than happy do some of that. So it sounds like some of the measurement issues that we've talked about, that we've been discussed over the last couple of months, are a factor, but not a big factor. How much is it right now, you know, that Nielsen or ComScore or someone else be able to amass those impressions for marketers?
Is that a buyer
The right
or
way.
seller's question?
Either one.
You know, I think obviously measurement is important simply because most of us are charged with delivering, you know, TV-based communication goals, particularly, you know, age and sex demography, and knowing that correlates well with a particular, you know, consumer and a product offering. So there have been places, I think, you know, some better than others, where we've had that conversation around what the metrics are. I think we're all getting there. I think, you know, there's a certain amount of logic involved in just knowing that you pretty much are sure that someone saw the commercial online. And if you look at the content that it's running in and you're buying that content in other places, chances are the age and sex isn't really that hard to figure out. You can make the assumption that it's going to be pretty similar online. So I think we're getting there.
So you don't need to have like a Nielsen people meter, you know, telling you every day,
Well,
you know, what was on Hulu last night, and you know who was, you know, what was the 18 to 49.
I'm going to know that person's 2+ number pretty accurately. Okay,
Right.
It's the other part of it that, you know, there's still some work.
Yeah, I think
that has
I
to be
like the
done.
idea that Nielsen is working towards some kind of a way to, not some kind of a way. They are putting a product out to market that's going to help a little bit with the unduplicated reach. calculations. Give advertisers and agencies some guidelines on how to speak about that, because it can be a factor in the decisions about how much to spend and where to spend it.
And I think ultimately we're going to want the best of both worlds. You need it to fit. You need the online video world to fit into the world of market mix modeling and be able to have the right data, because some of the foundation principles of how media plans are put together rely on certain key data points to be able to do that. So you need it to fit that. But at the same time, you want to maximize the potential of what online video can do that television currently can't do, and eventually will be in a more addressable world. But to Chris's point earlier, the interactivity, the ad selector models, things that you can do to make advertising more powerful and actually create behaviors instead of just exposures. So that's a beautiful thing if we think there's this potential there to go beyond what has been, a career for all of us being in the exposure-based media world. That's all we've ever had to deliver is exposure and then hope for the best. Now we start to link to clicks and behaviors and shopping experiences and things like that. That's what we should be thinking about. At the same time, we have to solve for how do we connect it to the old world, but at the same time thinking about the new world.
I think there are things we can absolutely learn from the digital world with respect to targeting business prospects and making that a very pure, targeting a very pure audience of auto purchasers or financial prospects or tax preparation prospects. The ability to target exactly who your client is looking to bring in for as a customer is something that we do not want to get. We don't want to apply the exposure principles to the digital medium. In fact, we want to do the reverse. We want to apply the targeting principles to mass media, which is why all of us are so involved with set-top box companies and meeting with a lot of the different addressable and set-top box targeting companies today, and finding ways to utilize those platforms to target better in television. It's about driving business performance, is what we're all in the business of doing, and digital is a great way to do that in a very pure way. So we need to be able to take those principles and bring them back to the mass media so that we can actually make mass media work harder for us. At the same time, what you're saying, Mike, I totally agree with, which is there has to be a way to go back up to a higher level that is really a very simple counting mechanism that allows advertisers and agencies to understand the scale of what they're putting together. It does not dumb down the medium, because we're not taking away from the engagement or the interactions that are available in digital media. Every medium has different levels of engagement, and that's why we pay different prices for different media, and that's why we use each medium differently. But I don't think it hurts to think about counting them together on a more simple metric.
Hey, Steve Reisman, kind of like Dave Cassaro in this, don't really have a dog in this fight, so just want to throw out, a thought to the panel. A lot of the conversation has been, from a buy perspective, a sell perspective, but if you flip it to a consumer perspective and look at what the consumer does, the consumer on average spends about 40 hours a week watching video across every device. 35 of those hours are on TV, live, DVR, VOD. Another 3 hours are on connected gaming systems, using Netflix and Hulu and YouTube and a couple of other services. Another hour and a half is spent, on tablets with the exact same services. Half an hour is spent using the computer to actually watch content, and then less than 10 minutes is spent using a mobile device. So if the consumer is spending their time, consuming content primarily on TV, and then TV-related content, primarily through something like, Hulu being the biggest one, and you look at the different services they're using. So, number one's Netflix, not an ad-supported model, but far and away, the largest share of viewing. YouTube coming in second, decent-ish content, a lot of GRPs, a lot of avails. Hulu, great content, a lot of GRPs, a lot of avails. And then, sort of everything else. Does it make sense in the context of, the subject of the panel? is it worth it bringing in the 2 or 3 really big players into the market? You know, a YouTube, a Hulu, maybe 1 or 2 others, change the dynamics a bit because they have what's reasonably valuable and what the consumer is spending time with, and you know, sort of ignore, you know, all of the other new pretenders.
Donna?
There was a question in there.
Yeah,
I know there was a question in there.
Could you repeat the question?
you know,
I don't know if there was a question.
I think the question was about YouTube and Google. Bring them in there. Bring a big player in there, and you know, can that player sort of help you guys?
Just to take a quick stab, Steve, I mean, there are a lot of points in there, but I think one common thread in what you threw out is that it's still about the content. So it goes back to what Joe said. The most valuable asset that any of us are concerned about up here is the content, and the devices or the distribution platforms that you talked about are basically using very reliable, high-quality content and taking a share of the marketplace GRPs because they're delivering that content. So I think in an overly simplistic first stab, this is still about the content. It's still about giving advertisers access to the best environment and the best content in which to display their messaging. And I think that's the common thread in the scenarios you're talking about.
Now, we have deals with other companies to distribute our product. But we have some research that came in that was really, really positive that said a huge amount of people are watching our TV shows and interacting with the device. Another big sector is interacting with their friends about what they're watching on TV. And about 20% have no interest in what they're watching on TV. They're just talking to their buddies. If we can capture the excitement of what you're watching on television, what you're seeing on your iPad, that's a great vehicle. We could do it ourselves. I don't know we need everybody else to do it. So if we can unlatch that, I think that's terrific. We had a guy came in, showed us a 3D, actually a 360 degree shot of, you can view this room as 360. I said, you know, we're selling kind of flat panels. That doesn't mean anything to us. I said, well, picture if you're on Deadliest Catch. And at one time, you can watch what you're seeing on TV, and on your iPad, you can see around what's going around the ship. And think about sports. That enhances our business. That's how I vision it, really.
Okay, I guess we'll leave it there. Give these guys a nice hand because they did a real good job sitting here. We appreciate it.